In 2010, the world was simpler, though it didn't feel that way at the time. People still believed that if you worked hard enough, you could buy a house with a white picket fence. People still sent SMS messages, carefully counting every character. And in 2010, a guy in New Jersey named James decided he was smarter than the system, or stupider. The line between the two, as any bartender in New Jersey will tell you, is thinner than the layer of cheese on a discount pizza. James was 32. He worked in delivery. His life consisted of boxes that needed lifting and addresses that needed finding. His girlfriend, Nora, worked at a pizzeria. She was 4 years younger and a whole lifetime more practical. If James was a kite, Nora was the person holding the string tight so the kite wouldn't get tangled in the power lines. They lived in the Jersey suburbs. It's the kind of place that always smells like rain, exhaust fumes, or the hope that one day you'll move to Manhattan. They shared a tube of toothpaste, shared dreams of a family, and shared the belief that they knew each other down to the last scar. Then came the pizza. You see, Frederick Bachman might say that human history is just a series of bad decisions. In May 2010, someone bought 2 pizzas for 10,000 bitcoins. Back then, it cost $25. James read about it online when he was supposed to be filling out invoices. "Nora," he said that evening when she came home from her shift, smelling of oregano and exhaustion, "do you realize what this means? Digital gold. It weighs nothing, but it changes everything." "James," she replied, kicking off her sneakers, "you can put gold in your pocket. This is just lines of code. We can't pay rent with lines of code." Nora dreamed of 5 countries in 5 years. She wanted to see Paris before it got too crowded with tourists, and Rome before it finally crumbled. James, however, looked at the Mt. Gox charts as if they were the EKG of his own heart. He was in love, not just with Nora, but with the idea of the American Dream 2.0. He gathered all his savings, the money they had set aside for a rainy day, or a ring, or something in between. He didn't tell her. After all, a surprise is when you do something crazy, and then that craziness pays for your first mortgage payment, right? On Christmas Eve, James sat in a tattoo parlor owned by his friend Peter. The air smelled of antiseptic and burnt skin. "I'm going to marry her, Pete," James said over the buzz of the machine, "but I want us to be bound by something more than just vows." Peter, a man whose body looked like a rough draft by a brilliant but intoxicated artist, looked up. "Listen, I have an idea. The password to your wallet, it's a long string of characters, right? Let's split it in half. We'll split one half on you and the other on her, like a lock and a key. No one can take your money unless you're together." To James, it seemed like the most romantic thing since the invention of Shakespeare's sonnets. In 2011, he convinced Nora to get matching tattoos. "It's a symbol of our loyalty," he lied, feeling like a spy in a movie. "My part means nothing without yours. Yours means nothing without mine." She agreed, because when you're 28 and you love a guy who brings you coffee in bed, you're willing to tattoo even his social security number on your wrist if he calls it a symbol. A month later, Bitcoin hit $32. James sat in the kitchen and did the math. $44,000. That was the price of freedom. That was the price of Paris, Rome, and 3 other countries Nora had underlined in her guidebooks. He proposed on the very evening when a sticky June rain was falling outside. He dropped to one knee and told her everything about the money, about the tattoos, about how their future was literally written on their skin. Nora didn't cry with joy. She looked at her wrist as if a rash had suddenly appeared there. "You spent our savings on this?" she whispered. "Nora, it's worth a fortune now." "It's thin air, James. You dragged me into a gamble without even asking. You tattooed a vault code on me that could vanish tomorrow." And tomorrow came fast. Mt. Gox was hacked. The price plummeted to a penny. The TV in their living room blared about the greatest crash in crypto history. "Irresponsibility," Nora said. Her voice was cold, like ice in a glass of whiskey. "You're acting like a child, James. I don't want to build a life with someone who bets our future on zero without warning me." The argument lasted 3 hours. 3 hours that destroyed 3 years of a relationship. Nora packed a suitcase. She didn't just leave, she slammed the door so hard the windows in that old Jersey apartment rattled for a long time. James was left alone, with half a password on his arm and a total void in his pocket. Part 2. The Art of Forgetting and the Science of Selling. If you've ever lost the love of your life over a line of computer code, you know that despondency has a specific taste. It tastes like cold pizza and cheap beer. James spent all of 2012 staring at a monitor. He followed Nora on Facebook as if it were his second job. Nora was happy, at least her photos claimed she was. There she was in Paris, country number 1. There she was in Barcelona, country number 2. In one photo, she was smiling widely, holding a glass of sangria, and James zoomed in so much the pixels turned into squares. Her wrist was clean. Where the lock to his key used to be, there was now smooth, slightly reddened skin. She had removed it. She had laser burned their shared future, likely paying more for the procedure than all his bitcoins were worth at the time. James closed his laptop and made a vow. No more investments, no more American dreams. He would take the most boring, most reliable path. By 2018, James was the top real estate agent in the state. He learned to wear suits that didn't pinch his shoulders and to smile at clients as if their desire to buy a house with a leaky roof was the most interesting thing in the world. He married a quiet woman who loved gardening, and they had a son. James was a good father. He was reliable. He was predictable. Sometimes in the shower, he would look at his left forearm. The numbers had faded and blurred under the skin, turning into an unreadable brand of his shame. He called it a youthful mistake. Part 3. The Day the Mirror Spoke Back. It was 2025, the year the world finally went mad, and Bitcoin became a religion for those who made it and a curse for those who missed out. James had a busy schedule, 3 viewings in one day. The client was a typical new money type, the kind who wears a hoodie that costs more than a monthly salary and sneakers you aren't allowed to get dirty. They walked across lawns, went down into basements, and tapped on walls. James was flawless. He knew everything about termites, taxes, and the smell of bad wiring. Toward evening, they stopped at a cafe. "You know, James," the client said, lazily stirring his latte, "that second house was total rubbish. The sod looks like it was stolen from a football pitch at 3 in the morning." "Agreed," James smiled. "I was waiting for you to say that. The first option, now that is a real investment, your first serious home." The client suddenly laughed, loudly, throughout the cafe. "First serious home? Oh no, my best investment happened in 2011. I bought bitcoins instead of a car. My wife nearly filed for divorce back then. Shouted that I was crazy, that I traded 4 wheels for numbers on a screen." Something inside James clicked. An old forgotten fear woke up and stretched in his chest. "And what happened?" he asked, trying to keep his voice from trembling. The client simply turned his phone screen around. A banking app was open. The 2025 Bitcoin exchange rate had smashed through an all-time high. James stared at the numbers. In his head, a calculator clicked, one he thought he'd thrown in the trash 13 years ago. 1,400 bitcoins at $100,000 each, $140 million. The world around James suddenly lost its focus. The cafe walls blurred. He said his goodbyes, not remembering how, sat in his car and stared at his hands for a long time. He was shaking. At home, he locked himself in the bathroom. He turned the lights on full blast and rolled up his shirt sleeve. The mirror reflected the numbers. "His half," he whispered. "It's only half. Half of nothing. Nora's wrist is clean. Nora has a new life in Europe. Nora doesn't have the password." He drank a bottle of beer, then a second. He felt like the protagonist of a joke who had forgotten the punchline. He laughed until he cried, imagining himself calling Nora 15 years later. "Hi, remember that tattoo we broke up over? Could you happen to remember the last 7 characters? Oh, you had it removed. Well, never mind. It was only worth $140 million. Part 4. The Old Master and His Greatest Investment. In the morning, James looked surprisingly composed. He shaved, put on a fresh shirt, and drove to Peter's old tattoo parlor. The shop was still there, in the same basement, smelling of ink and legends. Peter was sitting in a chair, sipping coffee. He had aged, grown a beard, but his eyes still shone with mischief. "James, to what do I owe the honor?" Peter smiled. "Come for another helping of mistakes?" James sat opposite him and laid his arm on the table. "Pete, remember 2011? That tattoo we gave Nora? She removed it. It's over. Delete mine too. I can't look at it anymore." Peter put down his cup. He looked at James for a long time, then at his forearm. "You know how much they're worth now, don't you?" "I know," James snapped. "That's exactly why I want it gone. It's a monument to my stupidity." Peter suddenly started laughing, softly at first, then at the top of his lungs. "My friend," he said, wiping away tears, "you were always too serious." He stood up, walked to the door, locked it, and began rolling up the pant leg of his left leg. James froze. On Peter's ankle, amidst old skulls and flames, the same symbols that were once tattooed on Nora's arm were clearly and distinctly visible. "What is that?" James whispered. "It's my insurance," Peter said, turning serious. "The day I did Nora's tattoo, my old mentor stopped by. He looked at your code and said, 'Peter, this kid is either a genius or a corpse, but if this is love, it's bound to break, and if the love breaks, the password breaks. Ink the second half on yourself, just in case.'" You've kept the other half all this time?" "I didn't just keep it, James. I looked at it every time I couldn't pay my rent, but I knew it's your money, and I waited. I knew one day you'd come, either to end it or to start over." They sat in the empty parlor, 2 men in New Jersey, one of whom had just become a multi-millionaire, and the other the keeper of the most expensive skin in the world. "You know what the funniest part is?" Peter asked, switching on the tattoo machine. "What?" "Nora sent me a postcard from Italy last year. She wrote that she misses our pizza. And you know what she added at the end? 'It's a good thing I got that tattoo removed, but sometimes I feel like I erased something truly important.'" James closed his eyes. He felt Peter's needle touch his skin, connecting the 2 halves into one. Life isn't just about bad decisions. Sometimes it's also about friends who remember the things you tried to forget.